Hey, and welcome to episode 3. And in this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the Stratocaster. So I can remember one of the very first things I ever saw about a Stratocaster was Stevie Ray Vaughan. And when I found out who that was, I was just blown away. And as many guitarists are, the way he just played the guitar, his sound was just so unique. I mean, and to this day, he's a legend. So he really was probably my first, if not second, but probably first, and somewhere one or two, top two influences when it came to the Stratocaster. And I knew when I saw that, followed by the next influence, which I'll get to in just a second, I just knew I had to have one. And I had mentioned in my Telecaster episode that I knew eventually I would get a Stratocaster anyway, and then I'd have the trifecta of the Les Paul, the Telecaster, and the Stratocaster. Geez, that's a little confusing to say back to back. But when I found this one, and you can see it's a Olympic white color, again, I just felt it was meant to be because my Les Paul was blue, my Telecaster was red, and now the Stratocaster I was eyeing was white. So red, white, and blue. I thought it was pretty fun when July 4th came around, and then I had a picture of that. So I'm going to try and find it, probably throw a picture of it here. But back to my influences, when I saw Stevie Ray Vaughan playing this, I immediately started looking on the market for a Stratocaster. And at the time, I had an Epiphone Les Paul, I had a Mexican Tele, so I didn't think, and I really didn't know, what the difference was between a Mexican-made guitar and a American-made guitar. And so this is actually an American Stratocaster, and when I found it on the market, I just couldn't believe the price it was at, and I was like, I got to go for it now, because as I started researching it, I realized, geez, these American ones really cost a lot of money. And so this one is one I found on Facebook Marketplace, and it's almost all stock, except for the pickups. Playing in a worship context, I remember at first, I was still pretty early on in my guitar career, and the single coil thing, my Telecaster had them, and they were just really noisy on a Sunday. So of course, as soon as I got this Stratocaster, it was back to another noisy guitar. And so I remember at first playing my Les Paul a lot because it just didn't make that noise, right? So I knew I didn't want to deal with that with two guitars, and so I really wanted to play this one though. And so one of the first things I did after acquiring it was actually get the Fender noiseless pickups. I think I played a service or two, and I was like, yeah, this 60 cycle hum just ain't for me, so we got to change that out. It did come with a little ding right there. Hopefully you can see that. So I don't really mind, because nowadays people are paying thousands and thousands of dollars to relic their guitar, and mine just kind of came pre-relicked, and so I enjoy it. It doesn't bother me. So I put the pickups in and immediately solved that problem, and I gotta say, I had a love-hate relationship with this guitar. Coming from a 2-pickup 3-way switch Les Paul to a 2-pickup 3-way switch Telecaster, to all of a sudden having 3 pickups and a 5-way switch and 3 knobs here, I was like, how does he play this thing without knocking all the buttons? And I just remember, I remember just how much I did not enjoy playing this guitar at first. I bought it and I forced myself to play it those first couple Sundays, but I just remember I'd want to be on the neck, and within a few chords, I was on the bridge. I'm sure if you have a Stratocaster, you could relate. But we were just not jiving at first, and it took a lot of practice for me to feel out the guitar, to learn to play it differently than the Les Paul and the Telecaster. So I just kept taking it to church Sunday after Sunday until eventually it ended up being the one I reached for most often. And so in those earlier days, I could remember like posting videos on Instagram or whatever, and I think I had a good slew of videos just back to back with only this guitar. For a little bit there, I was kind of touch and go and wasn't sure if if a Stratocaster was for me or if I wanted to keep it in the ever-growing collection. And that's where influence number 2 came in with John Mayer. And if you know anything about John Mayer, he just sings on the Stratocaster. And even ever since he left Fender and went to PRS with the Silver Sky, still a Fender or still a Stratocaster type of guitar. And so between seeing Stevie do what he does on the Stratocaster, John Mayer so soulful, so bluesy on his Stratocaster, I was like, these guys know something. These guys are playing this guitar when they could play any guitar, but they choose a Stratocaster, so there's got to be something here. And so again, I just forced myself to stick with it till eventually it became one of my go-tos in my arsenal. John Mayer had a huge influence just overall, just in choosing to stay with the Stratocaster, and even eventually buying a different type of Stratocaster. Hint, hint. So now I have 3 guitars in the arsenal. I'm still playing on Sundays, and the year I got this actually was when my skills kind of started to grow and expand. As a church, we started kind of going and playing in different places, and that eventually led to where I am today, but we'll get there. But I just remember this being one of the first guitars, or probably the first guitar I played outside of just my normal Sunday every week. So it was really special for me when we were playing a special event outside of church to say like, ooh, okay, which guitar do I take? And the Stratocaster is the one I took. Around this time as well, I started getting into the music production space and recording guitars. My church was wanting to run tracks, and I was actually switching between drums and guitar, so every Sunday wasn't always guitar. It's kind of like one Sunday drums, one Sunday guitar, or maybe 3 Sunday drums and 1 guitar, so it just kind of depended on the need that we had. But I started getting into the recording process, and that led me to softwares like Ableton, which is what I use to this day. So this point and this guitar really led to my first recordings and just understanding how music works in the digital space and taking it there. At this point I had a few guitars, I had the Helix, and I'd been playing live, but it was a whole new ball game. And yes, the red light syndrome was real when we'd wanted to add some, let's say I was on the drums and we wanted to add a guitar part to have for some tracks, where I was just like, I remember just struggling to record things at first. And so it took a while. It took some trial and error and practicing night after night to learn how to record the instrument and make it sound good and things like that. But this guitar was the one that kind of started it off with the whole recording process. And I, for one, am thankful. When I look back and think of what guitar would have been a good one to start with, people have their debates, but I think the Stratocaster has endured the many, many decades that it has, just because of its versatility, the tones that you can get with it, and it's easy for me to play nowadays, but I remember, again, I just had that. It was so hard at the beginning just because it was coming from 2 other guitars that just did not have all this in the way. Up to some days, even now, I'm still like, I wish this stuff wasn't there, but we've worked through those struggles. This guitar is really home base for me. I feel so comfortable playing it, and I think I'm probably going to say this about most of my guitars, but this is one that will probably stay with me for forever. I have played many Strats, from the ones on the walls of guitar centers to friends that I have, and they just don't feel like this. When I think of a Strat and how it should feel, this is it right here for me. And so I guess I'll never say never, but I haven't found one that feels as comfortable and as nice to play as this one. That could be just because I've had it for many years and I played with it a bunch, but yeah, this is a keeper.